Good evening. Welcome back to Around the Pit. Friends, if you are joining us for the first time, welcome. If you're joining us for the first time in 2 months, you're not alone. If you're joining us, I guess that really covers everything. Well, my name's Toffees. Glad to be here. As always, you can find me at Toffees TV if you don't know how to read the screen in front of you or if you're listening to the podcast. And I'm joined, as always, by 3 guests. Now, these 3 guests are unique. I invited them specifically for their talents and their beauty this evening. So let me introduce them to you, running right across the top of the map. First up is a man who used to go by TrentPax, but decided that he was tired of being compared to one of the best cameramen slash solo casters in the game and changed his name to TrentPax. He works for Moonduck Studios, is an analyst on staff over there, and often a color man on the streams. Trent, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, just lovely, my man. You know, it's a lovely freezing rain evening in Nova Scotia, as it usually is. Cars are slipping and sliding everywhere. I barely made it home, but hey, I got here in time.
I was driving Uber. Don't tell anybody I drive Uber from time to time during the freezing rainstorm on Friday, so I know all about what you're talking about.
There you go.
I made like $400 in 2 hours, so is what it is.
All right.
Next man in the middle, Lyrical Dota. This is a guy who used to go by Lyrical Gangster, but decided he wanted to tone down his thug life image, as you can see by how he's dressed tonight, and just be a bit more musical. Now, you may say, why is Lyrical here? It is not just because of his rosy red cheeks. It is also because of the fact that he went out of his way to cover a ton of games in the first tournament after 7.0. So Lyrical, you got a chance to sort of watch those teams adjust in a very tumultuous period. I'm excited to hear sort of what your observations are. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Oh, I'm doing great. The tournaments, like, by and large, didn't matter because nobody knew what they were doing. So it was all crazy. So really, I don't deserve to be here.
But you got to see them around with, like, chickens without heads, and I think that that's where the fun really lies. The rest of us got to see them skip across the screen like chickens without heads. Cart is our third guest. Some of you are like, what is Cart doing here? Cart and I chatted today, and he's actually spent some time talking to a couple of teams out there who are going through the adjustment phase and has specifically asked about what they're doing to deal with this. Cart's been writing for a couple of websites lately. I've liked a few of the articles, including the Ad Finum one that he put out, what was that, a week and a half ago? Glad to have you here, Cart, and glad to hear what your perspectives are on sort of the team's approach to this patch. How are you doing this evening?
I'm good.
All right, well, that was deep. That said, guys, normally I go through the rules of how Around the Pit works. There's a timer, and there's points, and there's a buzzer that sounds, I can't find it. Oh, here it is. Like this. But we're not doing that today.
Production value. Here we go.
That's the buzzer. Everybody loves the buzzer. That's not true. YouTube hates the buzzer. That said, though, we're going to switch it up. We're just doing a straight-up roundtable today. We're going to talk about 7.0. Here's why, and I talked about with you guys earlier about this today, is things have changed, how should I say, dramatically. This is not your mother's Dota, not your father's Dota. Hell, it's not your Dota. This is totally different. So a lot of our listeners, people who maybe, like myself, have a family, have a job, can only play 1 or 2 games a night if they're lucky, are sort of trying to wrap their heads around the macro view of, like, where's this game going? So that's what we want to talk about tonight. If there's a patch note that you're super into and interested in, maybe to ask us on chat, or you guys can bring it up, but that's not what I want to focus on. I don't want to focus on Wind Ranger getting a change to her 2nd level talents for extra intelligence because that makes her a total badass and worth picking. I'm not going to focus on that, but I am going to focus on sort of where we're going with the game. So if you guys want to get involved on Twitch chat, throw some questions out there. We're just going to talk for about 30 minutes or so, and I have a good time with it. So that said, let's get right into it, and I want to ask you guys this. What are your first impressions of 7.01 now, but 7.0? When you jumped into the game for the first time, what was the thing that stood out to you the most?
Well, I will kick off with just complete and utter chaos. For me, the mini map, that new one where it was like black instead of the old style, I felt so confused for my first 4 games. I'm a guy who's made like literally hundreds of these ward maps and studied every single like inch of this entire map, and it didn't even change that much. Like, I look at the game now and I feel comfortable, but my first few games roaming around the map, I was just totally lost. I had no idea what I was doing. I felt like I was never being efficient. I felt like I tried to go one place and then I see there's like 3 bounty runes and I'm like, oh, I gotta go to those. It was hectic and very action packed.
first few games were absolutely a disaster. It's like I go to look, I'm like, where's my HP bar? My HP and mana bar is down here. Where am I walking on this new map? What is happening? Oh my god, I have suddenly died because I can't see my HP and mana bar. It's like, oh, okay. It was just absolute and utter chaos. I'm still learning all the word spots.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't know where to put the words except for the hills. We're like, hey guys, put a word here. Pick me, pick me.
So I think that if we talk too much about the HUD, we're going to open up a can of worms that's never going to close, because there's been a lot of talk about that. But I would also agree with the map changes were a big one for me, and in particular, it was watching the pro players play the new patch on the new map. And the biggest thing that I saw was like the changes to high ground and low ground in the jungle. That really changes teams' mobility, and I kind of wonder if Valve was looking at like those heat maps that have been drawn a lot on like Dota buff and stuff, and they've changed around some of the common areas that people walk. Because if you take a look at like, and this is the thing that I saw when I was testing the China Top stuff, is that they would still make that same movement to take like the tier 1 tower in the safe lane, but then they would run into somebody and suddenly there'd be a battle, and then there'd be another battle, and then there'd be another battle. And it's like a change in vision where you're used to making a certain move, but now because you don't have as good a vision, you sort of end up in this awkward situation.
So to clarify, what you're saying is Skim over at Dota Buff is probably responsible for any issues that we have with the new mapping.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah.
Okay. Fair to
There's
say.
a hashtag for that, actually.
Classic Skim.
Hashtag FSkim. So I think that's true. I mean, is your guys' impression that the game is more frenetic, fight-oriented than it used to be, that this early game picks up faster?
I think so. I think fundamentally it has to be because of the way the map shrunk, in a sense, because of shrines. Shrines are a huge game changer. Just the fact that it used to be, when you think about taking Roche, for example, every single game you have that discussion of, okay, they're knocking down that tier 1. Roche has already opened up now for the Dire side. They take down that Radiant tier 1 pretty open. They get the Radiant tier 2, that's it. Roche is theirs, basically, right? Like the odds of the team actually getting there and contesting you are so low. But now it doesn't matter. You have to knock down all their tier 2s, and you've taken that shrine on their side just to get Roche. And that has changed a lot about that early game. It's changed a lot about that momentum. And the same idea comes from all team fights occurring anywhere near a shrine.
Now, let me ask you guys this. How many of you, and be honest here, in the first couple of games you played, your team said, let's take Roche, and then everybody ran to the old Roche pit and then went,
yeah, I pinged that shit. No question. Yeah. I was like, oh, Roche, Roche, Roche.
I went to the wrong bounty or the wrong rune spot a lot
Oh
at the
my God,
start.
I
I did
still
that
do
like
it.
5 games in a row.
I still do it because I mentally check out during that first like 14 seconds where I'm like making sure everything's in order. Anyway, I feel you. Okay, I feel you. Not sexually, just like
Well, while we're on shrines, I will say, has anyone else clicked them over and over unintentionally?
Yes.
Like I was like just trying to ward next to it, and the thing activated, and I was like, I don't even think I clicked my mouse. Like
It's way too easy. I feel like it needs to be like nuclear launch codes where you have to have at least 2 people try to activate it. It's like you like randomly walking along and then you accidentally click it. It's like, oh well.
I think in the series today, like two of them got activated, just obviously unintentionally. The player's just walking past it, full HP mana, shrine just goes. So I was like, well.
Because it's on the path towards that creep camp too. So if you're like a super clicker, like most of us are, I think, you just accidentally click it as you're trying to work your way around there. It's kind of crazy. What do you guys think of those? So for those of you who are maybe not playing as often, when they say that they're referring to the 2 new healing fountains, what's their official name?
Shrines. And the active is called Sanctuary.
Okay,
Thanks,
so-
Mott. He taught me that.
When you hear casters say Sanctuary and Shrine, they're talking about those 2 little healing pools next to the secret shop and in the middle of the jungle now. How big an impact do you think this is having on pub games versus like pro games right now?
I've actually the one thing I don't like about shrines is it just makes fighting way too easy. Just like the amount of times in my pubs where I've just been like, oh my god, I am in a fight, I am dying, I am losing HP, and then I barely make it away, and there's like, oh, there's a shrine right there, and then I go back to full HP and mana, and then I go and I win the fight. It's just like, they're just like almost no fight zones in a way. You cannot fight near those shrines, or near your enemy's team shrine, rather. Unless you're like way far ahead, you are going to lose, because it is a mini fountain right there that they can continue to fight in.
They're huge
For
for
the first
mobility
time.
heroes too. Like Timber, Puck, Storm Spirit. I've seen so many fights where that guy just zips his way over to a shrine. I'm like, well,
Yeah, that's true.
The other one that I saw a lot that was really, and I think it was again just bringing out the new hero thing, was EG. No, was it EG or was it DC? Somebody was playing Underlord, and they would take 5-on-5 engagements, and then as soon as the fight would end, Underlord would immediately dark rift his entire team to a shrine, and then they would take 1 or 2 objectives in a row. And it was so unreal how good that combination would work. So they do promote fighting around it, but they also promote taking objectives after the fact, because you don't have to head all the way back to well to heal back up.
Becomes very, very dangerous. Now, before we get into sort of that, because I have a couple questions about how Shrine affects laning, I do want to ask you guys this. What was your favorite change so far, and what's your least favorite change?
I think you know what my favorite change is.
Well, let's just say it out loud so the rest of us can mock you.
Boss, man. Techie's boss.
All right. So
I can't believe that Techies is somehow. How did Valve do it? How did they make that hero more annoying to play against? I actually can't believe. Like, kudos to Valve. They deserve a fucking medal, because I don't know how you could have possibly made him more annoying. But he's actually
no. The worst version of Techies was still instant.
No. This is so much worse.
No.
The entire game clicking at my feet so that I killed those little red mines now because their proximity instead of detection. Oh,
well, at least now, like, you have time. Like, he can't just plant bombs in the lane anymore. When he first was released, it was like a 0.75 second delay time. Like,
that was pretty great.
300 damage. It was really, really stupid when it first came out. So I mean, now he can lane in the offlane again. It's not as good as when he was released, but it's still pretty good.
So Techies, what's your least favorite thing that you've run into so far, Cart?
As Techies or just in the game?
In the game. Life is not defined by Techies.
Dota through Techies.
I think that Dire is too weak right now. Like, in the past, I've talked with Bobo a bit about this earlier. Like, in the past, you think, like, okay, Radiant gets easier laning, Dire gets Roche advantage, right? That's just been, like, a long accepted fact of Dota for a while. But now Dire doesn't have Roche advantage anymore. Radiant's laning is still easier than Dire's. And, like, even if you look at the shrine placement, like, if you think about Radiant's big jungle shrine, right? It is near the medium camp, the hard camp, the ancient camp, and then the medium camp. It is guarded by, like, it has 4 camps around it, right? Guarded by this shrine. So even if you lose your tier 1 towers on, like, safe lane and mid, you can still farm that and get, like, TP support from your team, right? Whereas if you look at Dire's big jungle shrine, they have 3 camps. One of them is the ancient. They have hard and medium and then the ancient. And, like, their medium's further away. Like, so they basically lose half of their big jungle. Where Radiant only loses like 1/3. And I think that's just really big. Like, I can't figure out a reason you actively pick Dire for, like, a really good reason right now. Oh, and Dire's bounty rune is easy to steal.
So Cart says side balance, and for those of you who don't know, Cart is not just always a walking meme. Sometimes he has good observations like this. Lyrical, what is your favorite and least favorite thing you've seen so far?
I would go. Honestly, I'd probably say the imbalance there too. I don't know if it's going to continue to be this way, but I was looking at it. It's a 7% win rate advantage.
Oh, is it? I was actually I DM'd
pub games at least. It's pretty absurd.
I wanted to see it in pros. I messaged Nox earlier, but he didn't get back to me.
Yeah, it's kind of intense for every single hero too. Like, there's a couple of them where it's not quite as pronounced, but that might be one. I'm torn between that and hating techies more, so we'll just have to go with that. But for me, my favorite thing is the talents. I really like the way that you can play almost every hero now in a bunch of different ways. I played a game as Weaver, and I was spamming Weaver for a little bit because I just really liked a couple of the talents and being able to mess around with them. And you can play him now either just getting like straight damage and then going survivability through your talents, or you can go him straight survivability through your items and then get damage through your talents. And then you can also do, some more of the crazy Lil Weaver stuff if you want to as well. But I played a game as Weaver where I was against a Doom and a Bat Rider and a Tinker with Hex.
Wow.
And I won
you were that guy.
Without a Lincoln's, I won that game like single-handedly because his level 25 talent is absurd. You can just go so much maneuverability. So the fact that you can play these heroes in so many different ways is crazy.
Oh yeah, I love the talents. I agree. Like, and to me, it feels like a lot of people were like shocked that they were added, but it's honestly not that big of a deal. Like, I'd say a good 70 to 80% of them are just like, it's like just getting another item for your hero, right?
Yeah, it's a flexibility piece
or not. I kind of really like it. Now some of them are just like pure clowny. I'm looking at Ulich plus 150 damage and then a free Scotty. I feel like Ice Frog wasn't even trying. It's just like, let's just put some little bit of fun in the game. Let's teach Dota players how to have fun. Let's
Uh,
do
he
carry
did. He
lane.
did add 400 talents to the game in one shot, so I think it's going to take a little
Sure,
bit of adjustment. Trent, what was your most favorite, least favorite thing so far?
Well, I was going to say the talents, and I'll expand just a little bit, and I'll try and pick something else too. But along with what you said about the idea of just building a single hero and those two different item build paths, one of my favorite things about talents is the way that they've opened up those roles so much more. We were casting a game today where it was Empire and Alliance, and there was a Bloodseeker pick, and Loda in this case was running as a position 1 Bloodseeker, so farming pretty intensely, goes for just the Midas, Blade Mail, Sanjin, Yasha. Whereas for the most part, at least for the games I've been casting, the Bloodseekers have tended to be an off lane where they see a good matchup and he goes Blade Mail, Forest Staff, Yule sort of a strategy. And when you look at the talents and the way they're set up now, you can spec fully into that sort of a strategy. You can be this total utility Bloodseeker and only buff things that are going to help that path. Or you can go the other way and get all this attack damage and build yourself up that way. So again, building on that versatility of Dota and why we all love it and making your hero so unique for that specific game, right? It doesn't mean every utility Bloodseeker is going to build the same because you're looking at your opponent. And that's what Dota's all about. It's those micro decisions for the entire game, whether it's picking the right item, going to the right objective at that perfect time, and adding another layer of complexity. I'm not even going to pick anything else. Honestly, I think talents, when I looked at them, I wasn't that happy with them because I was just oh my god, this is super scary. Once you're over that, they're very exciting.
So for those of you who are listening that are maybe sort of getting, not playing as many games, it sort of adds this flexibility. So if you say build an item in the early game and go, oh shit, this game really turned a corner on me, it almost gives you a way to sort of come back outside of just items into getting yourself back into that. Have you noticed a big increase? So to put in perspective, I played a game, somebody picked a Treant Protector. I thought they were support. They went to the lane and started taking last hits. Everybody on the team freaked the fuck out. And then all of a sudden he's got a Midas and a Radiance and just destroys everybody. And it worked. And so we sat there and went, oh, wow, roles, maybe they aren't what they used to be. Have you seen that across the board where heroes traditionally that weren't allowed to say be a core or can be?
Well, I can see the chat saying that mid-lich, man. That shit is fun. Shout out to Craig Christ, my man. That guy plays a mean mid-lich. That thing is legit.
So, what do you think?
In pros, it's a little bit different, though. And I think that the thing that's cool about it for pro games, though, is it puts more emphasis on you creating a strategy for yourself rather than you trying to counterpick and just deal with what they're throwing at you and out farm them or whatever. That's still viable. You can do that. But now there's so many different ways that you can run a different hero that if you want to run something in a unorthodox way, it catches the enemy team off guard, and suddenly you have something like a wing scenario where you have a very strong timing that you hit, and maybe the team hasn't seen it before, they're not used to it. So that I think that more emphasis on players developing their own strategies rather than just being more efficient is a cooler game to watch.
In this same kind of vein, I feel like nobody's gonna pick a hero because their level 10 or 15 town is really cool, guys. Nobody's gonna do that. However, it takes a little bit less off the draft in a way because, like you were mentioning, you can adapt like that mid game instead of kind of being resigned to your fates of the draft and saying, I'm gonna need these items in this time and this time and this time. It's not a big adjustment, but it's there. It allows you to have some kind of choice, like you were saying.
Makes sense. Now, I do think, Ryan brought up the idea that this is a potential to go into a death ball sort of meta, but I think the meta is very wide open. Let me also, and this is, so before we get to the pro scene, which I think is going to be very different than the pub scene I was going to say in this patch, but it's going to be a foreseeable future, right? Because the way that the map laid out, do you guys feel like it's going, in the past, I feel like you would see an established meta on the pro scene, it would sort of filter down to pubs and be sort of a watered down, less well-executed version of the pro meta. Is that going to be the same thing with this, or is the map so wide open and access to the jungles now so available that pub scenes may have a different meta than the pro scene?
What I would say is, I guess in terms of my least favorite changes, the fact that the camps don't spawn every minute.
Oh, I want to talk about this.
And what that has to do, because that is, I think, like that whole idea of this becoming like a death ball thing, that has to do with it in my eyes in a lot of ways. Like that whole idea of, okay, well, they're group up and fighting, well, we just need to max out this core, we got to get this guy ready, so we're going to fight at that tier 3, or we're going to fight them at Roche, we're going to be ready for that because we're maximizing the other side of the map. Now there is a limit to that. It's a little bit harder to do, can be harder to manage stacks. I don't know the full consequences of that yet. Obviously, we're very new into the patch, but to me, that's a huge change. I mean, it's basically cutting the jungle net worth in half in terms of what's available to you. I guess I don't necessarily disagree with it. I'm just concerned as to what effects that will have when it comes to that whole death ball meta and how hard it'll be to bounce back in some ways.
So you brought up the stack or the respawn change in the creeps. That's a big one. If you guys haven't noticed, and I'll say this for our casual listeners because it took me a couple of games to really wrap my head around it, is creep camps only spawn every 2 minutes now. So it is a very different ball game. Lyrical Cart, what's your take on this?
I feel like the early support game has really kind of changed. Like before, you kind of had, stack pull, harass offlaner, maybe gank mid, stack pull, etc., etc., etc. And you're just kind of like have that constant momentum going, stack pull. But now you've kind of got like a different thing. Now, granted, every even minute now, like every odd minute creep spawn, every even minute the bounty room spawn. Right. So you do have a bit like new things you can do, like you can go steal the offlaner's bounty rune. It's a new way to harass him. Like if your 2 supports go up and they take his bounty rune, then your offlaner is very sad.
I mean, that's true, but hopefully you get a kill there. Otherwise, you're getting 200 gold on 1 minute and then 600 gold on the other.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I just feel like it has changed the early support game, but just that in the fact that you can't stack as much. You do have something to do now that you can get the bounties, but I feel like we just might see more active rotations out of supports as like people adjust to it more, just because there's not as much to do. Also, rip.
I mean, either that or you get the other side of it, which is that there are more camps just in aggregate. So you get people that can farm in the early game and then transition into just getting those first couple core abilities up and then being part of the team that's moving around and finding kills. For me, when I was looking at the meta that was sort of evolving through those first couple of tournaments, it did look like there were some games where it was death bally, but split push is also viable, and I think that it's in some ways better economically, because if you have a hero like an anti-mage or a tinker or something else like that, you need somebody who can push out those lanes somewhat safely, because otherwise your jungle is limiting the total farm that your team can have. If you're pushing out the lanes and you can't get that next wave of creeps, but your opponents can when they push out the wave, that means that you're going to be more efficient, you're going to get more gold, and if you are on relatively equal terms, you're going to be able to do it. But a lot of the games that I've won and that I've seen teams win has been through split pushing. So I don't think that it's limited to just death ball right now. I think that there's still a ton of versatility within this patch. It just comes down to the heroes that get played.
Well, and it seems like, and I could be wrong here, obviously I'm not a pro by any means, there's more potential for a dual core split because of the fact that there's now essentially 2 jungles, right? Like you can push 1 minute and then fall back even on the off lane and pick up 2 camps plus ancients and then go back to pushing on the next spawn minute. So it seems like there's the potential to keep cores farming longer, which also seems to me like games are going longer than they used to. So we're fighting earlier, but going longer and leveling to 25 more often. Is that something we expect to see? Should I start planning all of my games to go to 25? Or is that just an abnormality because all of us just are fucking confused about how the map works right now?
I don't think so. We've seen a lot of Midases, especially in the competitive scene. I feel like every game there's at least one support getting a Midas, and usually the offlaner is getting a Midas lately too. So it's, certain games, of course, that's not going to happen. But for the most part, they're like, okay, this is probably going to go a little bit later. Even if we're kind of winning, we want to get that little bit of an advantage. And when you talk about what sort of a ranking we're going to have for dual cores or our traditional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm super excited because one of the things that I thought about this patch with bounty runes and the whole idea of less neutral camps and the idea of more fighting, I think it's a really fun time for heroes like Clockwork and Slardar. who come in this position 3 role. They go into the off lane to start, and they get their levels up. They hit 6, whatever, maybe get 1 core item as they start getting a couple fights. And then you want that position 4 hero to really start scaling up. Alliance did a fantastic job of it today in a couple different games using, I think in their games they had Slardar. I want to say it was Clockwork was picked up by Empire in one of the games, but I'm not sure. It might have been. But either way, the whole idea being that these guys that like fell off, it's easier for the supports to get gold, I feel like right now, just with like Midas buildups, games going longer, more fights through shrines, bounty runes are fabulous. So I think we're going to see more of like a 1-2, 3.5, 3.5. Poverty 5, kind of like we used to in the EG Glory days.
And it makes sense.
That's kind of what we saw even at TI a little bit. If you think back to like, well, I guess more recently, the Summit is really the best example of it, when it was VP that was winning all those games, and then Boston Major obviously they sort of shit the bed a little bit, but you've got Lil there who's playing the same type of role, getting into that position. So I think that that's super viable. The other thing about games going longer is that high ground is now way harder to take. It's really tough to go up there. First of all, because there's the 5 shrines that are now inside your base that are going to give you fountain regen when you're trying to fight around that area, but also you really do want to take down all of those tier 2 towers and then all of the shrines and then go to Roche. Because going to Roche when the shrine is up, like we've talked about earlier, is a lot harder too. So every aspect of closing out the game has been extended. There's just new objectives in there.
Yeah, and to talk about that just a little bit, the way that I've kind of been seeing it, especially in a lot of these games, is it's so much more kill oriented. Like before, I used to think about so much more in like flowchart Dota is what I've always called it when I'm casting stuff, because that's what it is. Like you can call every move for the next 5 minutes a team wants to make, and we would just see it happen, because it's like, okay, they're going to take this tower, they're going to take this tower, they're going to take this tower, then they're going to get Roche, or they're going to try and smoke for 1 pick, then they're going to go Roche. All that stuff's kind of gone. The whole idea of like the shrines being there, and it's so much harder to get these objectives, and same thing with high ground too. Now with those shrines being there, it's so much more kill dependent. It's so much harder to siege now if all 5 heroes are there. It's like not even worth it if you're this team, and that's part of why, as you said, these games are starting to get a little bit longer.
So
Also, the other thing is you have to remember that like, I don't know how many heroes. It's got to be at least like 30% of heroes have some kind of minus respawn time on their talent tree. I'm honestly,
that's an interesting one.
not sure how I feel about that. Like, I feel like that's
Well, you don't have to worry. It's never going to be picked in your pub. I can guarantee.
I pick
What
it all-
pub player is going to take minus respawn time?
You only
I
get it
think
because it's on
minus 60 on
techies.
techies.
It's like
I do.
amazing on techies.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
like pro players will get it, and we will see it there. But there's no way it's going to impact anyone in this stream. Like
I just
players don't. They're like, I'm not going to die. Why
I
did I
could
get
and I could have 25 damage instead of respawn
Yeah.
time. That's like
25 damage on my
an
crystal
extra
maiden.
crit. Right,
Like-
exactly.
Yeah,
Actually, that makes her really good at fast farming, but we'll get into that later. Or we won't get into that. That's just
probably the one
fun.
change I don't like. Just minus respawn time. That's just, before, like, you see so many times, like we are talking, like, get pick off. Okay, now we can go high ground. Okay, you get pick off. That hero is up in 20 seconds.
Hmm.
What do you do with your life now? Like,
Well, you hate your
you go
life,
back
and then you go
from the
75 minutes.
you try to kill someone else. I don't. That's the one change I probably like
So-
least.
Let me ask you guys this before we go straight pro talk. How do we see this change? And when I say this change, I mean everything changing, affecting the future of the game from a casual or a non-pro perspective. Does this make the game last longer? Does this add longevity? Does it make it more fun for a casual to play? Someone who's installing it, do you think they'd enjoy it more now than they did a year ago?
I think so. I think it's more active, although it's kind of confusing because we're even watching like pros and high level players being a little confused and still trying to work it out themselves. To me, it does seem like the experience of, oh, we're fighting more, and oh, I can get there for that fight. I can be there. I can be a part of that. I want to engage with everyone who's in this game. It does seem that is a stronger thing to be doing now, and a much more viable thing to do than perhaps maybe a year ago when we were more about just like, oh, stack that camp for me, man. Come on, let's do it. That'd be my take.
Gentlemen?
I always like sort of struggle with this question. As a longtime StarCraft fan and player, it was always like, this game's never gonna die. I'm sure about it. And then I'm here, and like, so I wonder again about it, because there's been those statistics that get put out that are like, Dota 2 is at its lowest player base that it's been in 2 or 4 years or something crazy like that.
Hey, they're all still downloading it, dude. Just
Yeah,
chill.
they're all
All right, they're coming. Just wait. Believe it.
But I do think that it's probably in some ways better, because like if you look at talents, when you click on it, it's this or that. So it's not as hard to understand what this or that gives you. You know what I'm saying there? So in that way, at least, it's a little bit more easy to pick up those couple of things. And I think that it's a more fun game as well. But also, I like StarCraft 2 a lot too, and I love playing it. So I think it's individual, and really the data is what you got to look at. In a month, I'll be curious.
Do you feel like this change was in response? Because we know for the last year we've seen some drastic drops in viewer numbers on streams and tournaments and things like that. Do you think that this change is in response to that? Sort of Valve saying, let's keep it fresh? Or do you feel like, well, we had a change planned anyway?
I mean, there was the whole like betting drama, and like, well, it wasn't as much of a problem as CS:GO. Like, there were Dota streams for like that had bots just like watching for betting and all that kind of stuff. I feel like it's not the biggest issue, but I feel like that's part of it. In terms of player count, it hasn't really dropped that much until just like 7.0 came out, obviously. I think that it's short-term detriment for long-term benefit in a way. Like, it is making the game more approachable. I remember like watching Day9 talk about when he was trying to learn Dota. I love watching Day9 trying to learn Dota. I'm gonna love this new series. But he's kind of just like, he was talking about the strategy behind it, and how there's like this item and this item, and you can like branch off into all these different ways. And he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's just like trying to figure out. And the only way you can do this is by playing more games and playing more games and playing more games, and kind of touching on what Lyrical said. It's two concrete paths. One or the other. So while we lost a bit of complexity, I mean, we're still retaining a lot of what makes Dota Dota. Like, we didn't lose item choices, we didn't lose any of our complexity. We just made it a bit easier to get into.
We didn't lose complexity. They kept their team together. They had a bad showing at the major, but they're coming back. Let's use that to transition to talking about the pro scene, because we got about 10 minutes left. I know that Cart talked to some pro teams. I know that we've sort of watched pro games. Really, as fans of pro Dota, what should we expect with a patch like this? I mean, is it going to be chaos for time in memoriam? What are teams focusing on right now to try and get themselves up to speed? It seems like this is a pretty massive change that maybe does it even open the door for new pro teams with different mindsets to sort of rise to the occasion?
See, it was a big change, and it also wasn't. Like, a lot of people got overwhelmed by the talent tree and the map changes. And then when you go look at it, not a lot of heroes got changed. Sure, Visage got really, really buffed, and a couple of the other heroes got nerfed and all that kind of stuff. And the SD illusion meta died. Like, not a lot of heroes got fundamentally changed in that way.
But the game got fundamentally changed.
Oh yeah,
for
sure.
Right? So
I just
how
feel
does
like
that affect the pro teams or teams in general? I mean, what do you guys think? It affects my pub. My pubs are fucking out of control. Nobody knows what's going on. These guys play 12 hours a day, so maybe they have figured it out faster. But I mean, like, there's got to be a learning curve.
It out for a while.
I think, to me, it's really like playing a new but similar game. Honestly, it's a lot like changing the map entirely. Like, if it was a completely new map, which it in a lot of ways really is, because all of the old objectives pretty much have changed. The main thing that's staying there is the structure of the lanes. There's still a mid, there's still a bottom, there's still a top. But everything around that shit's gone. Yeah. And so you still take down those towers, you still attack the ancient, but you have to hit the shrines at a particular time. The routes to get to those objectives are different. The objectives themselves are different. The way in which you take those objectives are different with the Roshan armor changes. Like, all these things are little itty bitty things that mess stuff up. But to me, it goes back to that term that, TrentPax was talking about. The slow start.
Can't even hear that without laughing.
I know. I tried to do it.
Just say Trent. It's okay. I literally just needed the packs to get everything on social. All right.
So, but the big thing for me is like it's just getting to understand what route you take those objectives. It's no longer the flow chart. We need to get a new flow chart. Flow chart.
Yeah, I know. Like,
get a whiteboard. See how that works out.
Bring back 2GD. Is that what you're saying?
No.
In terms of like
Go ahead.
what Lyrical was saying, and like everything between the lanes has changed. I know, like Kips, for instance, Fanatics analyst, she looked a lot at like these are the most efficient path movements that teams take, right? Going through between the lanes. These are the movements that team makes. This is the fastest way they can get there. This is how they farm on the way there, whatever, whatever. And then everything changes. Like, oh, thanks, Valve, you have killed my winter vacation because now I'm going to be studying the new map because everything is different. Just the jungle now having a bunch of different staircases on both sides.
Yeah.
So many different ways to move around the map now. It's absolutely real.
So in terms of teams adjusting at different speeds, because that's always sort of happened with patches, right? You have teams like Empire or Wings that sort of surge forward in new patches because they don't give a fuck. They just sort of do what they want to do, versus teams that sort of have been strategic teams that take a little longer to adjust to patches. We have teams, and this is my opinion, that are mechanically gifted in terms of 5 players who are just masters of their craft. And then we have teams who excel because they are team-based gifted, right? They're like the Detroit Pistons back in the early 2000s. What was it, 2004, I think? Right, when they play together like gods and they seem to understand each other the way that they breathe.
Oh,
Which of
good
those
times.
2 types of teams are going to excel faster in this patch? Is it going to be the mechanically gifted 5-top, or is it going to be the 2004 Pistons?
I think teamwork, because to me it seems like individual effort isn't as valuable in some ways. Like that whole idea of being this insane farmer. This guy's crazy. He farms everywhere. Or this guy always finds those pickoffs on the back line. Well, now there's shrines. Like, oh, so that guy, have that guy TP there. Oh, right, I was on top of a shrine. Or, oh, don't worry, guys, I'm going to get that in. I'll have that BKB in like 2 seconds, and we're going to fight. And now, maybe it's a little bit slower now. From what I've seen, I just like more team fights, more team coordination. Wings in their godly streak, they weren't the best laners, honestly. They were good, sure, but they didn't hit every last hit. You know what? If you actually watch Shadow lane, sometimes you're like, dear God, dude. Like, are you even looking at the computer right now? But they were just insane. They got like all their plays for that huge run that they had at TI, especially. They just never messed up. And that sort of teamwork, it's going to matter in any sort of a meta. And one where there's more team fights than ever before, it's going to be the best that it has been.
But do you think that teamwork was based on like time-honored intuition, like knowing how long the TP takes, the transition from the TP point to the rescue point, and it's going to take them longer to sort of get their heads around that with the new mapping and the new rotations and stuff? So mechanics will benefit early, and then teams will benefit later?
I would say that what Mompax is talking about, TrentPax is talking about, is that it's really, they are a team, but also they work incredibly hard. There's some people that are just like talented and do also work hard, but Wings, I think, are probably the hardest working team in Dota. That's a bold statement to make, but every single time they finish a game, they spend a really long time looking over the replays and figuring out the strategy behind it. Now, their individual mechanics aren't as strong as a team like like an EG or something like that, but they make up for it by trying to understand the game on a deep level. And so to me, I think they're a team that's actually probably going to adjust to it the most quickly. In the long run, it's that whole age-old adage, which is, hard work beats talent until talent learns to work hard. So we'll see if that ends up switching things around, but that's my thought.
Do you think this opens the door? So traditionally, and I don't want to say traditionally, over the last year and a half, we've seen the same teams continuously show up in the same positions, right? Our lead invites to every major tournament tend to be roughly the same. There's a lot of teams, Tier 2 North American, Tier 2 CIS, that have been knocking on the door but can't seem to break through. Does a patch like this open that door to those teams if they're willing to buckle down and work harder, faster? Can we see new teams in the next major?
Ex-Imperial, they'll be there.
Okay.
I think that's a perfect example. The old Imperial squad, like Rise Dota, all those boys, Baby Knight. I think with their new, still not announced sponsor, who everyone is rumoring about and whatnot. But I think a team like that who has displayed fantastic teamwork, all like for the past year, honestly, they've won so many of those random tournaments and never quite made the cut. Very much like Advenem previously, before they had actually made it to Boston.
Mhm.
I think a team like that could easily rise up, not only just because of a new patch. I think this patch actually helps them a lot because it is more team fight oriented, but just because there are more teams evolving. Right? We've always talked about how Dota made this giant leap because of all the resources that became available in Dota 2, replays, just general like community scrimming, money being infused into it. This feels like another situation of just it's still growing. Plus, we have this crazy new patch.
See, here's the thing that like we were talking both Lyrical and TrentPax, so whatever. Both of them touched on this, and that hard work beats talent, and talent until talent learns to work hard. A lot of the time we talk about how this team is grinding out game upon game upon game upon game upon game upon game. How the Chinese teams are constantly playing leagues, and EG and is just sitting there like, we're good. We don't need to play any games right now. The thing about the new patch is that like everything has changed so much that everyone is on even footing now. Like just because you're talented like your EG doesn't mean you're going to beat X Imperial because X Imperial is playing games. The only way like you are going to get a handle on this patch is to play more games. Like there's just too much content to parse without actually playing games and learning from your mistakes and learning from your opponents. So I feel like any team that just plays a lot of games is going to have a large edge over any team that doesn't.
Do you guys agree with that? This is going to require grinding.
Fair real quickly. Cart is flaming EG. I'm not. So
Right.
That's
I want to be clear.
I want to put that out there.
Valve, just write that down. Love True Sight. Great bunch of boys.
True Sight,
Never
great
saying
show.
this wrong.
But that was so sad for Samael today. No, I'm
Just
sorry. Go
use
ahead.
it as an example.
So,
Can
but
name other-
do you guys agree with that? That the grinders are going to excel early on, or do you think that being on vacation with your family in the first month and watching replays, instead of say grinding games, has the same sort of potential learning curve?
I think grinding's always better. One thing we learned when we were planning for elimination mode was we started asking teams, and they were all like, yes, we want to play games. Or like there was some other tournament that was going on where there was going to be like qualifiers or something, and then like teams, they were very eager to play a lot of games. This was all like post TI and everything, but this whole idea of like, because we had that big, saturation period. Where it's like, oh, everyone just wants that direct invite, and no one wants to reveal their strats. I think that was already starting to die off, even just after TI. Let alone now that we have 7.00. I don't think there are any teams that don't want to play games right now.
Well, in all fairness, isn't elimination mode kind of a unique monster because a team can
Oh, yeah.
choose to
No.
play competitive mechanically, but not have to worry about revealing any strats because who knows?
Yeah, well, it wasn't just that tournament. There was another one too,
Okay.
but just the whole idea of like actually scheduling tournaments, we were surprised how excited and not at all disappointed they were about playing qualifiers. They're like, yes,
see what you're
yes, qualifiers. We want to play Dota.
You want to play qualifiers? What is this?
Well, because you would think that they need a break after such a hard play period. That makes sense. But these players want to play. That's what it is. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Michael.
One other thing I was going to mention too is that I think from a player perspective, you're never going to get the same type of experience playing a competitive game that you would in pubs. But if all 5 of your players stop playing together for a little while, start playing pubs together, they get 5 times the experience than a team would from each individual game. And then you come back together after that when it's grinding time, and then you play officials. So in some ways, I think that you can get a lot of info from pubs as long as you're still approaching it in a similar way that you would otherwise. So
Yeah, there's one thing teams always say is that scrims, no one takes scrims seriously. Everyone, like every pro player always says that to me. I'm just like, well, what do you mean? It's like, oh yeah, we take it. It's just not the same, It's not like you're actually playing an official.
Well, if we were doing points, Lyrical, you would have got a couple right there because that was, I think, a pretty good observation. But you did bring up pubs, which I think brings me to the last thing I want to ask before we wrap this show up. You guys have had a chance to play a fair amount, or at least watch a lot of Dota. For the average player, not the pros, for the listeners to podcasts, the YouTube lovers, the guys who wish they could play but are stuck at work right now or at the gym and only get a couple games a night, what should a normal player work on first to maximize their impact in this patch? Because early patches are a great time to sort of learn the game before everyone else does, maybe pick up some MMR, maybe be ahead of the curve or get yourself up there, especially with something this big. What would you guys say is the first thing to work on?
If you
All
don't
right.
want to be a shitlord like me, you pick Necrophos and you just put him in offlane. That hero is sleeper OP. I am calling it right now. That hero is going to be the next big thing for the next few months.
So Cart says pick OP heroes, which has been the tactic for time immemorial. Anybody suggestions outside of just find the OP hero?
I got a great one. If you guys are playing off lane support, mid, or carry, I don't care. Buy the smokes and put them in your backpack. You got 3 slots. They're not doing anything. Get those damn smokes out so that you have them and you're ready to use them. If you are playing support, gank the mid. Like, honestly, I don't care what minute it is. It's like 1 through 11 or whatever. Chances are he's still sitting there. Just pull once for your core. He's under the tower. Immediately smoke up. Run at that mid hero. Just kill him. You'll just win your game. You're welcome.
I got a good one too. You log on, you hit unranked. By the way, I love the smoke suggestion. That's the best one. But you log on, you hit unranked. As soon as the screen pops up, you hit random hero button. You see your entire team, and then you do whatever the fuck you want. And about half the time will work out. That's what I figured out from this patch, and it's amazing. I'm having so much fun playing.
Advice for a 50% winner. I love it. Easy.
And I think, okay, and I'm going to give advice because this isn't a typical show, so I don't have to just be the dumb host sitting in the corner. This is a totally different game. Take it from me. I am a father, and I have a job, and I do a whole lot of other stuff, so I get 1 to 2 games a night. And traditionally, when somebody goes off the rails on their picks, I freak the fuck out because I only get so many games, right? Stop right now because the game is totally different. I have seen carry treant protectors. You probably have at this point. I've seen jungle crystal maidens. I've seen offlaners that transition into cores. So when you go into these games, I think open mind, even random idea like Lyrical sort of brought up is the key right now because people are trying stuff out that is totally working, right? Like builds that I never expected before because of the talent system. So I think that that's the key right now is go in open-minded, stack your smokes if you're support, and really just try. I mean, any other ideas that you guys have? What else can we work on?
I would just double down on it real quick that you learn what you can't do by pushing what you can do too far. Like you want to press that button.
This guy's dropping quotes all night. What is happening here?
I don't know, man. I'm just feeling it. It's the Zen.
It's the hat. It's the hat.
That's really what it is.
Keeps all the brain thoughts inside so they can't escape.
No, so much power is derived from having Dota on your forehead. It's like the infinity crystal, right?
Is that lined with tinfoil?
What's up, man?
Keep
Can't read my mind that way.
Keep Ice Frog out of your head, bro. All right, guys, that's about all the time we have for tonight. I appreciate you stopping by. Let's go down real quick. Tell people where they can find you, maybe what you're working on right now, or what you're super hyped about. We'll start out with TrentPax.
Yeah.
What's going on, bro?
So you can just call me Trent. That would be a great start for everyone. Or you can call me TrentPax. It's great. You know, do whatever you want. Or maybe I'll be pubbing and I'll call myself Chief. You never really know. I'm all over the place. But what am I working on right now? Casting, it's done, guys. You know, there's not really much happening for the old Moonduck. Keep an eye, I will say, on the Moonduck stream over the holidays and the Twitter, because they're having themselves a little shindig and we're trying to make them do content. So maybe they will.
Cool. And you can find him at TrentPax.
Yes. Oh, thank you for the seller. No mistake.
Problem. I got you back. Gabriel, what's going
on? For me, I'm done for the year. It was kind of weird yesterday. I did my final stream. I thought it was going to be the last esports thing that I was going to do this year, but this apparently actually is. And it's the first year that I did full-time esports fully. It's weird as shit. And now I don't have anything else lined up. So cross your fingers because the new year is when stuff starts coming around again.
Nice.
So casting and streaming.
And you can find him at Lyrical Dota. So, you know, he's got the flow. That's why he's got the name. Check it out. Lyrical, you haven't signed with a studio yet, right?
No, I have not.
All right. So studios, Lyrical just went full time without you. Imagine what he could do with you.
God.
Just saying. Just fucking saying. He also wouldn't mind moving to a house in Colorado or California. Cart, what's going on with you?
More articles, just working on trying to find some analysis work with the team, that kind of thing. Follow me at Cart Dota. I promise I don't shitpost that much.
Liar. No, I'm kidding. He writes some pretty good articles, so check it out. Do follow at Cart Dota, at Lyrical Dota, at TrentPax, And of course, at Toffee's TV. We got some fun stuff coming out for you guys. This is the end of the year, so I wanted to make sure we had a show up and running. New year on the way. We'll see new stuff from everybody, including here. The Coffee with Toffee's podcast is going to be adding some new stuff. We're looking at a weekly update show, about 20 minutes to just sort of keep you caught up on the scene, because if you're like me, it's really hard to watch everything that's going on and keep up with patch notes, so just sort of be an easy update. We're bringing on some new talent. I got a new guy who I think is a really great up-and-comer that's going to be doing some update shows for the podcast, as well as discussing things like drafting outside the box. So I think some new ways to look at old Dota, well, new Dota now. So make sure you guys check it out, follow, and stay with us, because we got a lot of fun and stuff on the way. I also have a big announcement coming probably in February. So make sure that you guys are following Twitter, because that is going to be a doozy, and I hope you all enjoy it. So that said, if you want to support the show, patreon.com/Toffees. Basically, we need to raise another $10 a month to pay for fees to podcasts. So if you want to be that guy, go ahead and be that guy. We'd love you for it. I got nothing else, gentlemen. Thank you for stopping by. I hope that you had a wonderful evening. Come January, I'd like to have everything back up and running. And guys, if you still don't have projects in January, get with me, and we'll just start finding like a solid cast for a roundtable discussion, because you bitches know your stuff, and I enjoy having you here. So have a wonderful night. Thanks for watching. As always, Toffee's out.